Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. Inside the Set is a series that focuses on the design and decor of stories that excite us and ignite our imaginations, where we get to discuss the collaborations between production designers and set decorators, and hear firsthand accounts of how those works of art came to be, from their inception to ideas on the page through completion, where we sit in the dark and experience them collectively.
Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. I'm Diers SDSA, and here today we're going to be talking about the new Netflix series Beef with production designer Grace Yoon and set decorator Kellie Tinney, who are respectively the production designer and set decorator on Netflix's Beef. I want to read to you, because I'm not as descriptive as some of the writers and the people who critique this show. From Cinema Club, they said, "The near-miss traffic collision and subsequent stalking and one-upmanship of each other are destroying them both. However, also the best thing that's happened to either of them." I think that also, to me, encapsulates the whole series, but there's one other exchange I'd like to read, this one from NPR. "But this exchange which sets them against a foe they can actually fight, rather than the elusive forces of family pressures, capitalism, racism, and emptiness. It allows them to take their anger and point it somewhere." And I think that is, a lot of us have that experience of this kind of road rage, and I think it's a fascinating story in 2023 for us to take a look at just one incident of it. So with that, I'd like to introduce Grace Yoon and Kellie Tinney. Welcome to our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you. We were still shooting this a year ago, so it's fun to get my head back into that space for sure.
So I think we could start this. Grace, if you would just speak a bit about your conversations with the director at the beginning of this show, and how he saw the show and how the two of you decided to visually put it together, and then maybe we'll go a little further into that.
Yeah, Sunny, the showrunner, he emailed me this really funny, long, descriptive email about what Beef is and what he was trying to create, and the characters, Danny and Amy. He gave a brief synopsis of that. So he first reached out to me via email, and I was on a feature at the time in Korea. And so we had this lovely email exchange back and forth. And we actually first talked about Danny and how he felt like a character that we both knew and grew up with. And we could understand Danny's and Amy's struggles as Asian American people, and also a deeper conversation about the idea of feeling what Sunny refers often to is the void, this emptiness that I think we all feel, and how that can, no matter what we pursue in life, like no matter what Danny and Amy's characters are trying to achieve and whether they gain success or not, they're constantly battling this feeling of dissatisfaction and loneliness, and how depression can manifest in anger, and how when they encounter each other with the road rage incidents, their expression of anger towards each other actually cracks open this connection that they have, which is the recognition of that the both of them they have this quiet suffering of being too aware of this presence of the void. So we talked about those themes. We talked about the themes of Asian Americans, of how there's such a variety of lives that are not necessarily seen or represented in I guess, American media. So, and also like different types of social class that is part of that community. We We talked about that. So those were the beginning themes that were starting to percolate in my conversations with him.
And then, so speaking for the audience watching today, how does those ideas, which sound, like fine ideas, how does that manifest into an idea of a building? How does that manifest into the idea of taking 10 episodes and making sure that we continue to understand that visually?
We talked about Danny's apartment being this place where Danny would think about or treat as a transitional space. So and then one of the first ideas I talked to Sunny about was like, what if the space was decorated in a way or built in a way where there were daily obstructions that Danny had to contend with. So it was something like he may bump into something. So, and there's this feeling of not being able to graduate from this space, yet life clutter and collections and unfinished projects are present in the space. So Danny's characters need to outlive this phase in his life because he's trying to start his business, he's trying to take care of his brother, he's trying to take care of his parents. All of that weight, that psychological weight, and also not being able to quite succeed in these ambitions, to be present within the clutter and unfinished projects and the collection of objects that he has accumulated. Some things left over from the motel. But so we started to go down that route, and also this other thing of inheriting this idea when you're part of an immigrant family, there's this scarcity mindset that you have to preserve and save anything that's still useful. So Kellie, Joe, and I started thinking about what could that be. It could be leftover materials and from his construction business. It could be something simple as Tupperware containers that he gets from takeout. So we just thought, things like having half-used rolls of tape, could be funny to have, or things like, I think he had a CD collection that he didn't want to get rid of because it was still something of use, and also a sentimental weight to it as well. And then, Sunny also mentioned that Danny's character reminded him of the first time he moved to LA, and how in his first LA apartment was so small and oddly laid out that the furniture, like he would wake up in the morning and stub his toe on his desk every day because he couldn't quite fit it in a way that allowed him to move freely in the space. So taking that concept and applying it to Danny's.
And then to contrast that, you have Amy and George's home, and you probably had some visual direction with that from both the director and then the two of you together. How did that conversation start and manifest?
Well, Sunny and I were talking about Amy's character as someone who, from the outside, was very put together. She's doing really well in life. She's successful. She has a family, a beautiful home that she's curated herself. And then we started to talk about, what someone with that type of high ambition and rate of success, like how would they almost use it as an instrument of control. We started to think about her home as a place that would feel very curated, minimal, yet would have nods to design styles, that she would have taste and a sense of the flow of space. So we started I started looking at references of mid-century architecture and also Japanese homes as well, to draw from her husband's heritage as well. And, Scandinavian interior design, and also architecture of like correctional facilities, because there was this other theme of Amy having this control and curation of her home, but she's trapped by that. She's trapped by this need for perfectionism of her trying to control the aesthetic of her life, because she's using it as a vehicle to, maybe it's a distraction, or maybe it's a way for her to achieve her goals in order to feel some sense of relief and satisfaction. But later on in the episode, you see that she doesn't achieve the happiness that she wants.
No. And so in one of the interviews or some illustrations, I don't know if you spoke about this, but that she's basically the creator of her own cage, and that she's put herself in jail. And just from what you're saying about Danny, is that he's created an environment for himself that creates obstacles daily for himself. And so there is a crazy visual language. The reason I bring this up is because I know that a lot of thought went into this, and that it is, if you look at this show, it is communicated in every episode. And congratulations, because it's there. And of course, with the cinematography and emphasizing what you guys created, it's lit, and it's one more time emphasized. I looked at a couple of the sets where, and I don't know if this is intentional, but maybe I'm doing the semiotics of film decoration and production design. But in the psychiatrist's office, when they're going to therapy, there are also vertical blinds, and again, it's a cage. And I see these kinds of visual motifs that you guys employed in the show, and I applaud them, because I think that subliminally these things work, and even in the contrast and the lighting of each of their apartments, yet both of them have soft lighting, like which maybe is necessary to have skylights, or for the compare and contrast of these two characters to see how they, for instance, she has space around her, in that one visual of her living room, and even in her kitchen, there's plenty of space around her. And then him, to emphasize again that he's created these obstacles for himself, and he continues to be his own worst enemy, making one bad decision after the next, even after he's learned the lesson. And her in living this life that is almost a fictitious life. And so, one, I think that it's successful, and I think that two, I'd like to Kellie Jo, if you would like to speak to maybe a couple of those details about how you want to take what you've learned from Grace and the director, and then how does it manifest in your selections?
So the great privilege of a project like this is that these characters are so well and fully realized on the page, and also conceptually in Sunny's head and in Grace's head. And most nights they were in the office late having these conversations and hashing out details that, as a decorator, like we often are reading between the lines and filling in blanks and telling stories for people that it makes sense for us, oh, I think he would have these items, but these characters, like down to, the types of subscription services they would have for vitamins. And Amy might have a little bit of a shopping problem, so there were always stacks of Amazon boxes. One of the first meetings that we had, which was really helpful for me, is like just really trying to get the Korean American background right for Danny's apartment, and trying to get the details of the kind of generational influence and the nostalgia that he was living every day, kind of like a kid of the 90s growing up and getting attached to certain, American brands that might have reflected a kind of affluence, or, like the Sunny D was very present. One really funny detail that Sunny recommended back in the background there is fortune cookie fortunes on the wall, and Danny's, you could just see him sitting at his table eating alone and opening this cookie and dreaming and sticking it on the wall. So I feel like that part of Danny is always in every frame, is just kind of this like longing, dreaming, but not quite getting it right. Something early that came up with you, Grace, when we were trying to figure out Amy's, it's a very kind of a cold space, reflected in the plaster, like the very precious plaster finish on the walls, and the surfaces that we chose, the materials that we chose, a lot of travertine, a lot of stone. But within that kind of coldness, like you guys always wanted to see the wires, you wanted to see the cords, you wanted to see like a kind of rawness, like we always wanted to see a few dirty dishes in the sink, or toys, evidence of a kind of a chaotic life.
Which is good to do those kinds of details, because otherwise in an interior like Amy's, it would feel editorial. And we're not doing editorial, we're telling stories, and those kinds of things about just describing that, no, to the onset dresser, I do want that cord in frame, and if those dishes are out of frame in this one shot that we have of this sequence in the kitchen, put them on the counter. And those kind of edicts that you raise, because you have created this perfect space for him, and then for her, and then for him, the idea of the totems. And I read an article that explained that, and I have to say, that kind of thing, when you hear it from people like the two of you speaking about it, and maybe coming from an actor, what it does is exactly illustrates the minutia that does fill every decision you make. And sometimes that minutia is the size of a little fortune cookie, and sometimes it's the selection of that couch, or the selection of that piece of artwork, or the things that you didn't put in the room. Can you either of you think of like that? Like, oh, we went down this path and we decided against filling the frame with. Is there any of those kinds of instances that you can think of where it was like, oh, yeah, we all fell in love with this idea, but then for another reason it was, wrong?
The challenge is always in decorating is editing, and sometimes you have to lose your favorite thing.
Yeah.
And I think the negative space was really important in Amy's. And also we had to really curate what was on the walls.
We wanted it reminiscent of like a bit of a prison cell of concrete, but Kellie Jo really found some beautiful artwork pieces that were in palette, something that we thought that Amy would really love, or at least think that if she hung it and had someone over, they would be interested in.
Tell me about this bed. Talk about what cold mother gave her daughter a slab to sleep on.
I think I pulled I was like pulling references of just, Scandinavian children's bedrooms, and wanted a platform bed, but something that felt a lot more raised, so that I could at least seat height, because there is that scene where Amy reads the book to June, and so that it would have enough room for her to sit and squat and be on it, and this like very minimal frame of like putting kind of her child in a box, like it's another containment kind of thing, but then softening it up, with this great bedding that Kellie Jo you brought together. And I also love the lighting that you brought into here.
Yeah, we built the platform. Gisu, our buyer, found this great company called Baby Lodge, and they have these really cool bespoke children's furniture lines. That was a fun one to do. Drew built the platform for us so it could just be the exact right proportions. But yeah, there's a lot of hard edges in that room.
Yeah, it's not like a place where a child wants to fall down. It's and Junie isn't that. She's very controlled, and so it seems absolutely the accurate room for this scene to take place.
Oh, there's one really funny detail from Danny's that I wanted to try to recall. Grace, do you remember the cologne, the specific cologne that Sunny called out?
Yeah.
Like Aqua di
Awkward to you.
Yes.
And then there was another one that you found that was great, or it was just this idea, even just that came out of Sunny's memory, but that was something that even I recall, like was a big thing for Asian American teens and young adults, that just some specific brands and scents that like telegraphed, like, ooh, you bought the fancy brand, and like, oh, you're going out for a night of clubbing or something, so you put this fragrance on. So I did love.
I would spritz it a little bit before we would go into shoot. Not too
Right.
much, that could go terribly wrong, but just create the bro zone atmosphere. I think
That is
Yeah.
great. So now it's even in smell-o-vision here.
Yeah.
yeah.
You started to mention lighting, and I would like both of you to speak about it, because there is such soft, beautiful lighting in Amy's, and it appears somewhat also in his apartment, but also in Jordan's. And what your relationship was, and how working with Larkin to create what mood he needed, but also to facilitate what made sense for the character in either practicals or soffits or skylights or whatever the location. And I'm just going to leave this question open to both of you to think about, that because, this is the only way they're going to be able to expose the film is if there's light. And so very often the art department and set deck is, charged with providing that.
Well, yeah, I think one thing I wanted to mention about Amy's, the design of her house, was that Sunny and I had a conversation where purposefully none of the windows really look outside. So she's almost deprived of sunlight and a view of a sky. So that's why we use clear story windows and just overhead skylight in the house. And speaking with Larkin, we mostly talked about the lighting in her. Well, overall, we did talk about using mixed color temperatures because that would give more of a grounded feeling of reality, and that Amy's lighting would be more of a neutral white or a warmer white, and something that would be even temperature throughout the house. And then Danny's place would have far more different colors going on, and because they have less control over the types of the bulbs or the fixtures that they're using. And then for Paul's room, especially, it was Kellie Jo, you brought in a great reference for the lighting for the LED lighting for Paul's setup. And then that became a featured thing to differentiate Paul's personal space from Danny's space, where it's like for Paul's character, it's all about the gaming setup. And I think Larkin utilized that purple lighting, the LED strip, and the lighting that you see in the consoles to create a mood that gamers often have.
Some of those things, it's funny in shows where some of those ideas come about either early or they come about later, but you sometimes notice you've been doing them all along. Even is like, okay, well, that idea, we had that early on, and then we kind of didn't talk about it, but we kind of kept both of us veering towards that idea. And I love that part of the process where, as a decorator, you're bringing in ideas to the designer, and then the designer brings them to the director or the DP, and then they sort of balloon, and then they become something that's actually written on the call sheet, is that we want to make sure that we're having that LED light for Paul's bedroom. Can we just talk about this shot right now? To me, this was what I was talking about, the semiotics of film, is that this division between the two boys is a literal. Was that deliberate, Grace, to have that plaster streak down the center of that roll?
Oh yeah, very much so. I think one of the first things I talked about with Sunny, and then worked with the set designer Brandon Hake on Danny's, was this idea that Danny could only afford one bedroom, and that he converted it to a 2-bedroom so that Paul can live with him. So we took a little bit of liberties and thought that this would be a large 1-bedroom. And then also had the idea that Danny, he has a construction business, but he's kind of Sonny had a funny idea that Danny would watch YouTube how-to videos in order to do a project. So we wanted to represent that this was something that Danny had took upon himself to create, and like most things in his life, couldn't bring it to completion.
Yeah.
So it's, you can see the door jamb isn't it, and it's not done being painted, and we just wanted to leave it in this state and make it feel like it's probably been that way for a year or two.
Yeah, and it instantly communicates that, and as well as it divides the frame between the two brothers. And those kinds of things I love in film, where this white line in the middle of this wall can represent so many things, and subliminally, I think the audience will get it. Is there anywhere else in this show that you were working with, trying to accurately get your Korean American research into frame and communicate that with the audience, either in these macro things or micro things that are in there? One of the reviewers talked about the fact that Isaac is, when he scams things, he's scamming things that might only be of interest to a specific, sort of subsection. And he's talking about the musical rice cookers, and then the high-end Barca loungers, or whatever, that massage chair. And the rice cooker, I might have guessed that, but the chair is are there certain cultural things that are you if and like the cologne that you were making sure were in the show or discussed with each other, so that the audience experienced that?
Yeah, I mean, I think even with the massage chairs, that was something that I don't think was originally in the script, and that came from a long conversation I had with Sonny. And my parents have one of those massage chairs, and having that is kind of a luxury item, but it also stems from this cultural importance about massage itself that also goes back thousands of years of what is considered healthy for you. Kellie, do you remember Sonny first wrote that that scene that took place at Arena was in a massage chair store, but yeah, right, due to like budget and production and schedule and stuff, we couldn't really afford. I know you looked into like trying to get all these different massage chairs to fill a store, but
yeah,
it ended up being
the chair was like a character unto itself at a certain point. Yeah. We were going to do a whole store, and then the schedule, we couldn't marry two locations that would work. But yeah, that was a big deal finding those. And we had a couple, and we were actually able to we had one in our gold room that that was a really nice treat at the end of a day for a little while before it went on set. But yeah, that was a big undertaking. We ended up finding like a wholesale place, and I almost had to have them shipped from Texas, but Gisu found some crazy place, I don't know, Lansdale or Palmdale somewhere, I don't know.
You have also a couple of flashbacks, and you also have the telephone call with the parents in Korea. That research and that kind of photo research, and also just to sort of deep diving into what you can deep dive into when you're prepping a show. Is there anything you'd like to share about that part of the process? About especially I think. For you, Kellie Jo, this is not, a culture you grew up in, and so there's a learning curve for you, and how do you tackle that as a decorator?
Yeah, I was very nervous about getting those details right. And Grace put together really beautiful boards, really beautiful reference images for us. I think for the flashbacks we were doing 90s, those had to be period correct. Yeah, I really wanted to get those right. We spent a lot of time, you know, going to the Korean communities, Korean neighborhoods, and shopping all of those malls, shopping on eBay. And thankfully, we had time to put those together. I remember one of our first conversations with Sunny and Stephen. Sunny was talking about like a very like specific way that his family used to stack things in their apartment and in their homes, and so we really tried to get that detail right. The wallpaper was beautiful that Grace selected. We had time to really massage that set, but
The wallpaper, we our graphic designer, we worked with our graphic designer to make, and same with the grate that's outside the window, and then the flooring as well. There's a special type of flooring in Korea that's traditional, that's used with a paper method, but we couldn't find that here, so we ended up using a laminate. Actually, I was very grateful to Kellie Jo and your team to finding these accurate details, which was very important to Sunny.
So you mentioned earlier, of course, the chair as being almost a character in the show. Now we can go to the tamago, which is a character in the show. And I'd like you to speak about that because it's certainly another symbolic thing. But is that a chair you actually designed?
Yes, it's a chair that we made, art department made, designed, sculpted, did a resin coat, and a scenic, and welded the legs as well.
And that's based on, first of all, obviously the script, and and then also just to be able to show the butt crack because it's supposedly, which is hysterical. That room also is an incredible curated room of a chair from column A and a chair from column B and a chair from column C. Can either of you speak to me about that selection and even dressing that set for camera, because it is just chairs on a slick white floor, slick white walls.
First of all, that location is amazing. That location was really, really cool. And you guys had to do some work to make it shootable. The one great advantage of shooting in Los Angeles is, of course, the amazing prop houses, amazing resources that we have. I think anywhere else in the States, or we would have had to use, 100 vendors. Originally, it was written as 100 chairs, 100 years. And I think, Grace, after you laid it out, we really only had room for 65 chairs.
Only.
So very early on, this is usually my process, is I'll go and I'll shoot a trillion pictures and then kind of, put everything in folders for later when we need to figure out our design. And I went to Modernica and just shot every kind of iconic chair that they had. And then we printed everything and put them on the wall in the hallway. And Grace and I went through and discussed every single chair, and we wanted to kind of try to make sure that the green of the tamago would stand out amongst all of these other designs. That was a really fun one. I think Modernica, of course, we used Modernica, and we filled their docks for a day with all of these chairs, and they were like, what are you guys doing? What is happening? So this was a really fun one.
Yeah, it was fun going over and walking to the set deck department's wall, because you had the images up on your walls for a while, and each time I remember I would like pull one off or like do a star, and then it would kept evolving and changing, and and sometimes we'd pick a chair because it just would make us laugh, and it was just like textural thing.
The blue fuzzy chair made
The
us.
blue fuzzy chair.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah, it was really fun to think about, and such a treat to think about all the ages that these chairs represent. We wanted a big variety. So, and like Kelly Jo said, yeah, to preserve that green color, which isn't also throughout the show a unique color. I didn't want to use it in any of the other sets or props or decoration either.
That's good, because then it makes it so special. I mean, at one point, they're back and forth on selling that chair, and it becomes either it's commerce or it's sentimentality, and it feels like that chair and that color, as you now let us know, in green, color of money, whether it's that had anything to do with it or not, becomes a lot of where the tension is that, life would be a little easier if, George, you would just help us sell that chair and we could move on. And then come to find out, of course, that the mother kind of needs the money too. And sentimentality just goes out the window. Like, forget about that. Like, let's cash in. And to me, because I'm a decorator, or because we're today talking about decorating and production design, to me, the concept of this room, where it is, as George says, it's a celebration of chairs, is just such a funny event. And these people are also respectful, and no one's sitting down, or you're not supposed to sit down. It's an absurdist kind of thing that this show has plenty of elements of these kinds of too strange to be true, and it probably could be true. For me, there's a couple of things that I want to ask you that maybe aren't quite art department, but maybe affected art department and set dec, which is the symbology, and the symbology of, for instance, things that come in later in the show, like the crow and the witch, which feel to me, I'm paying attention along with the show, and then something happens where I'm like, wait, I didn't understand that, or and this witch thing comes, and I can relate to it as a child from scary stories and so on. But was there a lot more of that discussions of things that were symbolic, both like the green chair, not to use it again, or that color, or this concept of witches, or because I just find that the more you dig in these shows, the more that it comes from somewhere.
I'd say for Sunny, there was some kind of personal symbology we stuck in there with the number 22, and so Amy's tattoo is 22. That was something, and I kind of want him to explain all of that, because that was something that we tried to sprinkle in there. And the crows was really something. I remember having this conversation with Sunny, because I'm not from LA, and this beef was my first project in LA, and I remember saying to Sunny, like, crows are so prevalent; they're everywhere in LA, and he had this feeling that they're incredibly intelligent animals, and he felt like they're constantly observing us. So that was a theme of I guess you imagine a meta feeling of like another species observing how absurd our species can be. Just a little I like that fun kind of separation of being able to step back, even though there's so much intense events happening in the show. And which is why I think it makes a lot more sense for episode 10. And one of the overarching themes that Sunny and I talked about was trying to slowly introduce more surrealist themes, and making it odder and odder that episode 10 would be, by the time you get to episode 10, it'll be not easily, but more accepted, rather than just like a random, like what is. I know that whether it was successful or not, we tried.
Yeah, it does. It crescendos. I mean, one crazy thing happens, another crazy thing happens. I mean, again, this show is in good standings with shows like Triangle of Sadness and White Lotus, where it is, this kind of social commentary about the class system and so many other things, yet through the lens of something that is, absurdist or surreal or just over the top, that it sort of buffers something that's can be so bloody or violent or so upsetting, and it wisely crafted this show. Are there any other sort of I guess color coding or character compare and contrast that you guys were aware of doing that you'd like to speak about, or any of the other kind of details, for instance, in Jordan's, which again, I feel like there's two camps. There's Isaac is part of Danny's camp and Jordan is part of Amy's camp, that those design choices in her crazy universe, which was this unattainable wealth that Amy is in a way aspiring to, and how those decisions came, like to pick this location, Grace, is I've never seen anything like this. This is amazing, this place where her home is.
I mean, I give credit to Michael Percival, our location manager. I mean, he presented a lot of like options that were mansions and homes. And for Sunny and I, we just felt like nothing was hitting on the right note, because it had to feel, I think Jordan had to feel like this on this other tier of living, of exclusivity, in a way that didn't feel like another like just large mansion or sprawling space. I mean, Kelly, I remember we had a lot of conversations about Jordans and what Jordans could be, and that we didn't want it to feel like, I guess we wanted to feel unique and different. I guess it really clicked, actually, Kelly. You showed me this one photo of this table that was made out of this huge chunk of marble.
The Saturn.
Yes, it was, and it was the shape of a we called it the Saturn table because it was the shape of a planet with and the tabletop was this ring. And I remember being like, that's it. That's Jordan would have things that a crane would need to move. Like it would be just some crazy thing, like whatever expense didn't matter. This was all for her own entertainment. And then that sparked the idea of her home feeling like her own exhibition, her private gallery.
Yeah, I think we decided that we were kind of going in like a, what would we say, pathological anthropologist direction, where it was just so unrestrained. And whereas, the rest of the show, there's this tension of, a lot of restraint, especially in Amy's, and her place is just like all hard edges and metal and these untenable materials, and like chairs made out of bottle caps and glass chairs, and these we went to Joel Chen's we went all out on this set. I mean, this was the highlight of my career, honestly. What do you do in that space? I mean, how do you honor that space? It's just like there's an austerity, but also kind of like a terrifying kind of beauty of that space.
It was completely uncomfortable, unwelcoming. That because also Amy entering into the space, the way Sunny had written the scene was like she's kind of she's on edge the whole time. And then even when she's left alone having her nice private moment, she also is like on edge because she's surprised by one of Jordan's attendants. But right, and then the discovery of this crown room. So this wonderful location used to be a synagogue. And while we were scouting it, we discovered that the walls would move and close, and thought it was that sold it for us. And Sunny actually wrote that into the scene after scouting this.
That's great. I like how organic it is. And just for a moment, can you talk about these headdresses? Did you guys make these, or where did we find this kind of crazy amount of beautiful things?
Oh my gosh, I wish. Well, we made the Rose, our prop master, had the hero kind of chimu. Was that what it was called, Grace? The Peruvian gold.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had that one made because that was scripted, but if we had time, I wish we could have made every single piece, but through the series, so this was supposed to shoot, it was originally like the first week of our schedule, which would have been insane. Yeah, remember, it was like the second week of shooting, and then it pushed to the end. Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine having pulled this together. Well, but we didn't really have a location. So I had the buyers, I think Jenna Craig and Gisu Javadi worked on this, and we shot every single headpiece in all the costume houses in LA, and we were trying to select very non-Eurocentric pieces, pieces that didn't feel costumey, things that felt more like artifacts, things that felt like she shouldn't own them because they should be, she probably took them from like a dig site, so we just tried to select the most beautiful and kind of non-Eurocentric pieces.
Well, it's a success. I mean, it's amazing, and again, it's absurdist, and your choices are beautiful, both of you. And I don't know if there's anything else either of you would like to highlight in the last few seconds of the discussion today, as far as some of your journey on this show, or some sets that maybe we didn't cover. Here's an image of the church.
I particularly love this location, this Korean American church. I grew up, I have personal experience in Korean American church, and I remember having many in-depth spiritual conversations with Sunny and Stephen about these scenes, and how it was so important to get it authentic and grounded in reality. And we wanted it to feel a bit of, very close to home. So I ended up having a wonderful conversation with one of Sunny's friends who's a pastor, and who they actually cast his church and part of his congregation and praise team to do these scenes. And I think on a personal level, this show, I related to so many of the characters' experiences and felt a kinship with Sunny and what he was trying to create, and am super grateful that I was able to explore that with him and with Kellie. And I'm very proud of what came out of it.
You should be, and I think all of that reads, and that your experience and you guys brought to this is pretty phenomenal. I don't know how much prep time you guys had, but basically you guys did this. It's basically 2 feature films. It's 10 hours of screen time, and I'm sure a lot ended up on the cutting room floor, and some very amazing sets and amazing details that were shared. I want to thank both of you for doing this today. This has been fun, and I hope it's been fun for you as well. I don't know.
It has. Thank you so much for making it easy.
Sure.
Yeah. Your reading, I like your amplification and your reading of all the details too. Some things that you brought up that I hadn't even thought of. So
yeah, well, you know what? It's all there, and it's part of what you guys do, and it's I think helpful for everybody who watch these things also to like it. it maybe validates the crazy process and shows that it's worth it. Like it is. Those details are worth it.
None of this would have been possible, of course, without the amazing guidance of Grace and Sunny, and also our directors Hikari and Jake. But my team, my amazing buyers, Gisu and Jenna and Kathleen, and my lead man, Skylar, and my gang boss, Mike, and Taylor, our coordinator, everybody just works in such beautiful harmony, and they never, ever, ever let me fail, and I love them.
And they're so fun. This was a pretty challenging show. We had like 7 weeks of prep, and I, honestly, Kellie Jo and her team had made it so much fun. We had so many laughs and so much fun.
Just laugh all day.
Yeah.
We just keep going. Just keep it going.
And my art department, they had the best attitude and worked so hard, and everyone really, really cared about getting all the details right. So I'm super grateful.
Yeah, so organized. They were amazing. What an awesome project. There's so much soul, and I'm so grateful that I stalked you and cold emailed you.
And now we're good friends. I love it.
See, there you go. That's how business is done. Exactly. Well, great. I'm glad to have met both of you here today, and hope to see you guys somewhere in person.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Inside the Set with Set Decor. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, setdecor.com.